You know, it seems when something as factual as science moves into the world of politics and media, problems always follow. Global warming isn't any exception. With billions of dollars of funding at risk and the world's attention in sharp focus, some say there's no room left for dissent. But how can you stop scientists from debating? Isn't that what they're supposed to do? There is one solution, of course: belittle, insult, and sometimes threaten the lives of those opposing voices until they're snuffed out and can no longer be heard.
You know what? The science is in, the debate's over.
The scientific dialogue is compromised.
The debate on global warming is over.
It's not.
Well, if there was only one side and it was absolutely correct, that side should say, please interview these stupid idiots so we can cut them to ribbons.
You're really being told your job's in jeopardy if you speak out.
If you dare to speak out, oh, you don't care about the planet, you don't care about the children or the future.
Scientific consensus has been overturned over and over again throughout history. From eugenics in the 1940s to global cooling of the 1970s. And every generation has groups that think that they're so right, they shouldn't be questioned. But today, with warming, the heat is really getting turned up.
We're in a level of hysteria, and to me it's astonishing.
I think those people are entitled to their views, but in many cases it's not the scientific consensus.
David Legates is a state climatologist in Delaware, and he teaches at the university. He's not part of the mythical climate consensus. In fact, Legates believes that we oversimplify climate by just blaming greenhouse gases. One day, he received a letter from the governor saying his views do not concur with those of the administration. So if he wants to speak out, it must be as an individual, not as a state climatologist. So essentially, he can have the title of state climatologist unless he's talking about his views on climate? Confused? Here's a demonstration.
We have need for sanitation.
Delaware state climatologist.
The biggest misconception is that climate change is going to be dramatic and that it's going to be extreme.
Some guy with a Delaware license plate.
So I am charged as state climatologist to speak out on those issues. But I make it clear that I do not represent the views of the state.
I have no frickin' idea either. But what could possibly happen if you speak out with the wrong title?
I've had several friends who have essentially been told if you speak out on climate change, you will essentially be fired.
Meanwhile, in Oregon, the state climatologist George Taylor is under fire for his take on global warming.
Most of the climate change we've seen up until now has been as a result of natural variations.
Solely because of this opinion, Governor Ted Kolongoski wants Taylor to be stripped of his title.
I just think that there has to be somebody that says that this is the state position on this.
We reached out to Taylor. He said only this: being skeptical about the effects of human-caused greenhouse gases on global climate variations can threaten one's long-term job security. He's choosing his words very carefully. These days, it seems you have to. Why?
No serious scientist, no peer-reviewed scientist is saying that, okay?
Those who deny global warming are just flat out wrong.
Ellen Goodman from the Boston Globe wrote, let's just say that global warming deniers are now on par with Holocaust deniers.
Somebody says that whenever you get into Nazi connections, you've really jumped the shark.
No Nazi references? But how would these people even form sentences? Even I got to jump into the World War II of weather. Robert F. Kennedy called me CNN's chief corporate fascism advocate. When asked why by the Washington Post, he recalled that I was voicing doubts about global warming a few weeks back.
When you have the science on your side, you argue the science. When you don't have the science on your side, you attack the messenger.
Look, it's practically in my job description to be called a fascist by people who hate my guts. But that's not what scientists sign up for. They're just trying to give their opinion based on the best information they can. But how can they, when the debate moves from science to their livelihood, or sometimes even worse?
Many times I've been tempted to say, why am I doing this? Why am I running my head into a concrete wall?
Tim Ball received a PhD in climatology from the University of London and spent his professional life under the radar as a professor at the University of Winnipeg.
If I had gone along with the prevailing wisdom, the funding would have been enormous. Instead, I'm accused of getting the money from the oil companies, which is simply a lie.
Whether you agree or not with what the other side says, the debate must not only be tolerated, it must be encouraged.
I think that the truth is absolutely paramount. And if we abandon that, we're lost. And I don't care if the people or the politicians choose to ignore me. That's their choice. But what I don't want is I don't want them to ever be able to come back and say we weren't told.
You are not going to believe this, but sometimes fear makes people act irrationally. Luckily, we have the media to put things into perspective because nothing ever gets overhyped on television. The truth is that a show like tonight's trying to cut through the hype isn't sexy. With global warming, the ratings are in the disasters and the media knows it. Severe storms, devastating hurricanes, and massive walls of sea pummeling major cities. These are the kind of extremes that movies like The Day After Tomorrow propagate about global warming. Even Jake Gyllenhaal isn't safe. This, you know, is fake. But you can get similar stories from less convincing actors and no cool special effects. But you still get all the drama.
Brings us to this week's grim report about global warming and a looming climate catastrophe.
Extreme weather, from drought to heavy rain and cyclones.
Seas are rising. Hurricanes will be more powerful like Katrina, and polar bears may be headed toward extinction.
We don't see that happening. Tornadoes are not increasing. The frequency of hurricanes is not increasing.
The world is heating up fast, and we have ourselves to blame.
I'm going to tell you something about the media and global warming that you don't hear real often. It's not all your fault, okay?
The problem with the media is that it's essentially become a business, and everything's got to be more sensationalized.
This just isn't hype and scaremongering that global warming is real.
The fear element drives the media, and the media drives the hype. Fear is part of the equation now.
When I started out in 1970s, global cooling was the consensus.
He's not exaggerating. Take a look at this article from the LA Times in 1978. No end in sight to 30-year cooling trend in Northern Hemisphere. Or Time Magazine's big spread from 1974 asking, another ice age? Newsweek said global cooling evidence had begun to accumulate so massively that meteorologists are hard-pressed to keep up with it.
You just switch out warming for cooling, and they've written this before.
It's true. The hype has been steady. The only thing that has changed is the temperature of the catastrophe. Take a look at this headline from the New York Times in 1959 claiming a warmer Earth evident at the poles. But just 2 years later, in the same newspaper, we find this. Scientists agree, world is colder. Even in the mid-90s, the Times was talking about a frozen Earth. Except it wasn't the 1990s, it was 1895.
You get whiplash reading these things.
My whole career has been going around saying the climate changes all the time. Get used to it.
When we come back, in the Oscar-winning film An Inconvenient Truth, Al Gore says the debate is over and the verdict is in.
Isn't there a disagreement among scientists about whether the problem is real or not? Actually, not really.
Not really? We'll try to separate the science from fiction in An Inconvenient Truth. Coming up next, don't go anywhere.